Late reports from the embattled northernmost province say South Vietnamese paratroopers, together with their American advisors, had pushed to the southwestern edge of Quang Tri City. Initially, they'd encountered virtually no resistance, but now they're facing a heavy line of fortifications.
January 24th, 1966. The largest search and destroy mission at this point in the war is Operation Masher, a sweep coordinated with the 1st Cavalry Division, South Vietnamese and Korean forces through the Bình Định Province. Located in the south-central coast of Vietnam, Bình Định has been an important base for the North Vietnamese Command. The goal is to not only flush them out, but decimate their supply areas. The 1st Cavalry is faced with the dilemma of Viet Cong intermingling with local villagers, severely handicapping their ability to openly use force.
You know, the Mama Sans would come in and do our laundry. We had a Papa San that came in to go and empty out the drums from our outhouses. Turned out that Papa San was a VC, and he ended up getting found out and arrested. For whatever reason, he was, a VC informer.
We took care of everybody that came through our doors, and a lot of them would be Vietnamese. They were always very polite to us. Our interpreter, of course, was Vietnamese. We had a Mama San that shined our boots and washed our uniforms. A lot of the ladies that cleaned the nursing units where the patients were Vietnamese. We had a pretty good relationship with them. Some of the Mama Sans would tell us when the VC were going to be in the area and to be prepared. There was no hostility that I was aware of between the women, at least with the women and the nurses.
I never went into the village or anything like that. I figured there was enough chance of being killed without going into the villages, and so I would do at least one thing that was safe and stay away.
Leaflets written by the U.S. Army's Psychological Warfare Office are dropped, warning villagers that if they do shoot at U.S. aircraft, the Army will seek out and destroy them. Another leaflet urges Viet Cong members to surrender and gives them a chance to return to the South Vietnamese cause. It promises government payment to help support the VC member and his family.
I worked the POW unit, and that was a different story.
Please tell me about that.
Basically, they were VC or suspected VC, and they were not too happy to be there. If there was a firefight and VC were wounded, the American soldiers, we would dust them off. But because the South Vietnamese government wouldn't give them medical care, we took them in, stabilized them before we turned them over to the South Vietnamese government. Of course, I think our military intelligence talked to them first, very nicely, I'm sure. But we stabilized them, nursed them, took care of them until they were able to be turned over to the South Vietnamese government. And they were not always too happy to see Round Eyes. Quan Sit Hut at the 85th, and I had a North Vietnamese first lieutenant at the very end who played chess all the time with the MP. And then the MP took one Viet Cong out to the outhouse. We had outhouses to do his business, and forgot that and came back in because it was so hot, and forgot that the Viet Cong was in the outhouse. And the next thing we know, we heard the Vietnamese yelling and screaming because he went out of there. So I think the MP was a little bit embarrassed that he had left his prisoner by himself. Luckily, he didn't have an opportunity to run away.
It is clearly a psychological ploy designed to not only spare innocent casualties, but to also diminish the morale of the Viet Cong. Disturbing is the conduct of the South Korean soldiers. They perpetrate both the Bin An and Tay Vinh massacres. Unarmed civilians of both villages are killed by the soldiers, 1,200 in Tay Vinh and 380 in Bin An. Such atrocities will become synonymous with the war in Vietnam. President Johnson, mindful of potential public outcry over Masher's name, has the operation renamed from Masher to Operation White Wing. At the end of Operation White Wing on March 6th, there are 2,389 enemy casualties, with 1,342 deaths. The U.S. suffers 288 KIAs and 990 wounded, while Korea and South Vietnam lose 10 soldiers in action. On the first day of Operation Masher, Defense Secretary Robert McNamara recommends boosting U.S. troops to more than 400,000 by year's end. He doesn't believe that bombings and deployments will end the war, however. The temptations of the Vietnamese nightlife, particularly in thriving cities like Saigon, include drug use, prostitution, and alcohol. As troop concentrations increase in the early days of the war, so does venereal disease. From 1965 to war's end, VD is the top diagnosis in all soldiers, at 1 in 4 soldiers. 50% of all soldiers affected come from Saigon or 2 other base camps. Gonorrhea is the primary VD at 90%. Luckily, it only requires hospitalization for only 1% of all its cases. It is still a rate higher than any previous war. March 26, 1966. As American involvement increases in South Vietnam, the most highly organized week of protests to date begin in 5 cities: New York, Washington, Chicago, Philadelphia, Boston, and San Francisco. The National Coordinating Committee to End the War in Vietnam arranges the protests. An estimated 30,000 to 35,000 marched down New York City's Fifth Avenue alone.
But the anti-war movement really didn't start until Berkeley. It started it started with the free speech movement, which is, I got a whole slew of theories on that, where that comes from. It's, Mario Savio, Comrade Mario Savio started that, so we can say anything we want. We have freedom of speech. So you're going around using the F word back in '65. You didn't do that. They'd lock him up and he'd get out. And anyway, that was the forerunners at Berkeley of the anti-war movement. And I could go on hours and hours where it came from, because we heard it all over there, and probably knew more than anybody except deep cover intelligence CIA. But
I didn't understand it. I didn't appreciate, I couldn't understand why people wanted to be so negative against the soldiers. But now that I'm older, I can understand it, because I'm not so hot about us being in Afghanistan. So I guess the way I feel about being in Afghanistan is how they felt back, during that period about being in Vietnam.
They are to be far from the final protests against the war in Vietnam, and a harbinger of the civil unrest that will come to define the decade. January 10th, 1967. President Johnson, in his State of the Union address for 1967, despite social criticism of Vietnam, stands firm that American troops will maintain a presence until North Vietnam aggression ceases.
Until such efforts succeed, or until the infiltration ceases, or until the conflict subsides, I think the course of wisdom for this country is that we just must firmly pursue our present course. We will stand firm in Vietnam. I think you know that our fighting men there tonight bear the heaviest burden of all. With their lives, they serve this nation. and we must give them nothing less than our full support. And we have given them that. Nothing less than the determination that Americans have always given their fighting men. Whatever our sacrifice here, even if it's more than $5 a month, it's small compared to their own. How long it will take, I cannot prophesy. I only know that the will of the American people, I think, is tonight being tested.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help us produce more compelling historical content like this, please like, comment below, and share this video with fellow history buffs. And of course, be sure to subscribe to help keep history happening.